Morning. For those of you who braved the winter and cold, and we realize that some people are joining us online, and we welcome everyone. Today, Scott Rumsa, CEO at Community Action House, is going to bring us up to date and tell us a little bit more. I received just recently the newsletter from Community Action House, and you too could receive this in your email. You could talk with Scott about that, or just email hello@communityactionhouse.org, and I'm sure they'd be happy to list you in their distribution list. But I really liked the opening to the newsletter. As we enter a new year, we're looking back on 2023 with nothing but gratitude for what our community chose to accomplish together. Your support as volunteers, food drive partners, financial supporters, cheerleaders, and advocates made it possible for more neighbors than ever before to find the healthy food, belief, and partnership they needed to move forward. Thank you for providing that we are a community where caring happens, second chances are creatively found, and our neighbors experience unrelenting kindness and connection. A partnership emphasis about that and the togetherness is just really wonderful. And the partnership definitely comes through again and again with Community Action House, and we are so thankful to be partners with you. We recognize that Community Action House started with a vision from some people who were also Hope Church members, and we give thanks for that. So we're thankful that you're here today, Scott, to bring us up to date and tell us more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. And is this on? Yeah. And thank you all for being here. It's we happy few who have braved the winter storm to be here and hear about Community Action House and some of the other stuff that I was invited here to present on. And so I appreciate you guys doing this. Hope the journey was safe and okay. For me, it was very short, so that makes it easy. It wasn't as short as Peter's, so he gets the least bonus points for being at Hope Church today. Sorry, it's true. And I don't know if we want to rate our hardiness by the distance of travel, but we could do that. Yes?
Gordon did say it's double points today for attending.
Double points. This is good. I'm glad to hear this. So I was invited, and there's been a couple times I've been invited to share about Community Action House. And I'll talk more about Community Action House as Jane was sharing. But also, they listed about 5 or 6 bullets when Jane Dickey invited me to do this a few months ago, and was like, hey, I'm wondering if you could talk about, what's changing, what are community needs and trends, and it was a big list of things for 40 minutes, but I always appreciate a challenge. And so she was talking about human needs, she was talking about poverty, housing, these things, and also like, what's the policy landscape, what's going on at the county, what are things that we might not be aware of, or some of us are, some are not, in the space within which you work. So I wanted to do more than just talk Action House. And so I've combined a couple presentations that I did in December, and one's just kind of like this landscape of need as we see it, of human need and trends here in our region of Greater Holland-Zeeland, right? And so I'm going to start with that, and then I'll get into Community Action House, kind of where we've come from, what we've been up to, and where we're going as one important initiative. But so you heard Jane say, we see ourselves as a collective community effort, and we also know that we can do really big things together under the aegis of Community Action House. And we also know that many of the challenges I'm going to talk about for our community are wonderful opportunities and are things that are only accomplishable if many institutions, many individuals all choose progress together, right? And so this is a rowing together thing. I don't pretend to show Community Action House can solve everything. And I also don't want to feel despair when I talk about some big challenges that exist in our community. There are also big opportunities. So I wanted to combine those two presentations. So I also want to, before I really dig in, to say what Jane said. Usually sitting around at Hope Church or on Sundays, we've got people that have been involved with with Community Action House for many of our 54 years. There are folks that sit in our pews that were involved in our founding story in 1969. There are folks that have been involved with us during different initiatives and different phases of our organization's life. And so it is an absolute privilege to have moved back here to my home on the lakeshore to take over the leadership position at Community Action House. Because this is something that I think is a very special institution in the Holland area, an institution that prioritizes welcoming all and partnering with all in a time of need in a high dignity way. An organization that knows that better is possible. I believe we are part of a creative expression of community compassion, and an institution that knows together is the way. So when you talk about kind of values, welcoming all, better is possible, together is the way, these are things that drive us forward. We try to move a together movement. Other peer institutions, but so many, over 1,000 volunteers in our community, finding together ways forward. Because no one entity, no one bank account solves some of what we're talking about. So it's an honor to be here, and I'm just grateful to be a part of Hope Church, an institution that supports so many valuable things like La Houppe last week, Johnny and our friends over at La Houppe, and Lighthouse next week. I'm just proud to be in this ecosystem that Hope Church creates. So, I want to share that this is not my data. I want to share when I'm talking about need or financial struggle in our region, I'm going to dial in largely focus on Ottawa County just because our data comes county by county. We serve two, Ottawa and Allegan, in the greater Holland-Zeeland area. And I've pulled some data from Ottawa County assessments. United Way assessment of Ottawa County. There's an Alice report. I'll talk about what that means. There was Housing Next, the Housing Needs Assessment Update. Housing is and housing challenges underpinning a lot of need, and then a bunch of other sources, some of which I'll name. So I want to say this is not stuff I've collected. I've just synthesized and aggregated, and there's great sources that I'd be willing to share around if some of these sources are new to you guys and you're curious to dig in further. So first, if I talk community trends, this probably is not a surprise to all of you, but Ottawa County is the fastest growing county in Michigan. This has been about 15 years running, fastest growing county in Michigan. And right now we're the 8th largest county. This data is a little bit outdated. We're just over 300,000 people right now. And if we look down here, when we say greater Holland-Zeeland, we're just over about 130,000 right now. Again, outdated, 124,000 listed on that map. That's our core service area, and then if we extend more broadly, we are a growing county. Those are our household growth numbers from 2000 onwards. The dark blue is Ottawa County compared to Michigan's growth standards. So starting with that trend of we are a growing county. Lots of population has been moving in over time. There's opportunity when a place thrives, and a lot of people want to call this place home. They want to build a life and a family here maybe. That's a wonderful thing. Median household income growth. Back in 2010, that was $53,000 a year. By 2020, $72,000. It was about $76,000 a couple years ago when they updated that. So again, median income is growing. These are good trends, right? We want to be a part of an economically vibrant place that has the means to offer many different services to others. So some community trends. And then if we start to say okay, if we look at kind of the part of our neighbors or part of the group that might not be at median, but start looking down towards the bottom of income side, how might we define financial struggle? And so I want to talk about poverty versus Alice. So some of you heard about hey, somebody living in poverty, or you might see the federal poverty level or federal poverty line. That is an economic measure that was put in place in the late 60s, and that is used to decide when an individual or family qualifies for federal benefits and programs. What it is not is it is not an effective measure of financial struggle. There are a lot of people that are technically not in poverty as measured by the federal government, but for whom the numbers do not add up. Their income does not meet the cost of essentials, right? And so I'm going to go into a little bit about that, and that's especially because the federal poverty level doesn't adequately take into account the many different costs that make up the local cost of living, right? And so with a thriving community, we're going to talk about local cost of living changes and what that means for some of those that are financially struggling. And so if we're just talking poverty line, there's about 23,000 people at that very low standard of in poverty in Ottawa County. Of those, nearly 1 in 4 are children, so that's 5,500 children living in poverty. And then if we're talking about numbers, if you want to put this to what the actual income is, a single person living in poverty in Ottawa County, that means they're earning $14,580 a year or less. If you're a family of 4, so 2 parents, 2 kids, that means $30,000 or less. We're going to kind of go into budgets later and maybe talk about how those add up or not, even if you're at $35,000 or $40,000 for a family of 4, and what makes sense and what makes life sustainable for people in our community. As I briefly shared, financial struggle also exists well above the federal poverty level in our community and in many communities. And that's especially true as wages and Social Security have failed to keep up with the rising cost of living in our community as well as elsewhere, but especially in our community. I shared about that growth curve, right? In our community, lots of people moving in, that's great. Cost of household essentials, when you look at them, it's like this basket of a few big goods. If you think about it, it's housing, food, transportation, childcare, healthcare, and like a basic phone plan, right? How do I stay connected to the world? Those are those essential goods that we look at that make up kind of what we say the essentials. And I often refer to them as the Alice essentials. And how many of you are familiar with the Alice framework? Yep, many of you. As Hope Church people, I expect many of you are. So Alice is an acronym that we use to talk about like financial struggle for people that are not in poverty but are still struggling. And what that means is it's an acronym for asset limited, income constrained, but employed. And we usually do a / or retired. So basically they have meaningful income. They don't have a lot of assets, a big bank account that they're sitting on, but they're income constrained. Their income is limited, even if above the poverty line. So they earn more than the federal poverty level, but less than the basic cost of living in the county. So that's the Alice threshold. So you have the poverty threshold, then you have the Alice threshold of like, I earn more than poverty, but when I look at my income versus my basic expenses, I'm still not making enough. That's financial struggle, and I'm going to talk more about that group. So when we look at poverty a second ago, we saw that lower number of neighbors, which is still significant in a place like Ottawa County. If we look at this Alice threshold, about 82,000 have incomes at or below the Alice threshold, or 82,000 neighbors, not households. That's 32,000 families or households. 29% of our neighbors are in this kind of struggling, like how do I match income with expenses in the area? They qualify as Alice. And what are the numbers that drive that? A single person living in Alice is $29,000 or below. A family of 4 is like $57,000 or below, where it's like the income struggles to match the others. Unless you own your house free and clear or some of those other things, again, asset constrained and income limited, right? I want to share a bit about this growing ratchet. We talk about community trends, as Jane asked me to talk about. If we look at this blue line, I know I got 3 here, but this blue line right here, that is the Consumer Price Index, growth since 2007 to 2023. If you're on Social Security, that's roughly what your Social Security changes by every single year. If you look at that yellow line, that is the inflation of the Alice Essentials Index. Housing, food, transportation, healthcare, childcare, those things are increasing every year at a rate greater than the standard rate of inflation. And what that means is over all those years, that adds up to about a 43% differential. So if you're living only on Social Security, and I'll get to Community Action House in a minute, we serve a lot of people that are living on only Social Security, and every year your income goes up this, but most of your expenses are on essentials, not other things. Your cost of essentials goes up a little higher. And then income goes up this, essentials go up higher. That's a bad ratchet game to be in, and that's a challenge. And so that's a trend for many there, as well as for lower income workforce. This gray line is the average increase in retail profession. If we look at that time, this adds up, this difference between here and here adds up to about $26,000 over the last 15 years that they've kind of lost out, that has been inflated away because essentials are raising at a faster rate than low wage income or Social Security. If we get down to this Alice survival budget, we talked about that threshold and how it's built. What we do is, not we, or what is done by those that are putting this together, is they look at a county and they try to estimate what are the basic, like limited costs of some of these core things, rent, utilities, childcare, food, transportation. They say, what if it's a single adult? What if it's 2 adults and 2 kids? And they'll go through different household compositions, and they have a big table of this. And then they'll measure how many families don't make enough money, so an annual expense total, it's down here. And then what's the hourly wage it takes to make that doable? There's full reports and handouts that are linked in this presentation that I can share out later if you're curious to dig in more. But the point here is that when you add all those up, you're like, okay, single adult, you look, $1,482 if all these expenses are correct, about $29,000 a year. So we mentioned that single person. That's what you need to meet to make sure that your income is always at least at your expenses, so you're not in the red every month. If you're a family of 2 adults, 1 infant, and 1 preschooler, you add in childcare, you also get some nicer tax credits in here. You see a negative number. That's the earned income tax credit. And then you have a higher annual toll of having to earn about $62,000 across your household, the 2 adults. An average hourly wage for one earner, if it's there, of $31.34, $62,000 annualized. Now, I ask a question about that because I see this, and as a realist here in Ottawa County, I say, is that rental price realistic to what any of us know about Ottawa County? So I would say, when I'm talking about the numbers of families that are measured to be Alice and struggling, that assumes you're going to find rent at $649, right? Do we find that? No, we don't find that anymore. So I don't know where they got that, but if that number becomes realistic, I can push on the other numbers. I think they're pretty realistic. The child care, I think we might be able to find a little bit lower. I've looked maybe 900, depends on what infant care we're doing, if they can find spots. But there's challenges. That increases these even more. You're going to have more families. So we see more and more families that are struggling to match their income with their expenses. Right here, this is like 2 years old. This is market rate median rent landscape, like median. Over $1,000 for a single bedroom, $1,080 for a 2-bedroom. That's if you can find these. If you go on Zillow right now and look for rental homes that are actually available, that number will be higher. And so I'll challenge you to do it later today. So then we kind of compare what's needed on the wages. So again, assuming that rent is right, $1,482 for a single, $3,134 for this family of 4. You can compare it against common working wage ranges, which generally varies in our region between $13.93 and $24.74 hourly, kind of frontline service occupations, $27 to $51 annually. And you kind of see these ranges of this Alice survival budget, 1 adult, 2 adults, and so on. A single senior, 2 seniors. And then you can also compare that against common Social Security income levels. The national average for somebody drawing Social Security is $20,516 annually. A single senior's Alice budget right here is $32,000 in our community, right? And so we're below that. And so because of some of these cost structures not matching with the income side of things for many families, we have got more and more just in struggle where I'm not traditionally in poverty, not working, without a home, but the numbers do not add up. And I would note that housing costs in our community are an increasing burden. Families without sufficient incomes are prioritizing housing, which means more families are rental cost burdened or severely burdened, paying over 50, 60% of their monthly pay in housing. Because if you've got a kid, what's the last thing you stop paying? Housing. First you cut back on food. Then you might start splitting your medications or not really going into the doctor when maybe you think you should because your copay is $10,000. And you're trying to economize on each of these other essentials because you want to pay your rent, because you don't want to be living in your car. And so as the essentials, we also prioritize within them. And so as we work with a lot of low-income families, that we see this. What's economized? You economize on childcare, and you trust that family down the street that you don't really know to watch your kids so you can go in and not get your third strike at work. And I usually don't get emotional, but I have both the privilege and opportunity of knowing some really bad stories that happen because people take risks because of financial pressure. And that's real, because they need to keep paying rent. And they're trying to hold it together. So, into the housing needs, if we talk about that population growth, back to how fast our community has been growing. That's great. People want to live here. Workforce is growing. Good opportunities. People are coming in. Lots of new household starts. People are coming in. Now, have we been building housing fast enough for the last 15 or 20 years as this has been happening? My answer to that is no. When we can look at kind of the math. How many homes have we built versus how many people are moving in? And homes equals apartments, equals small places. It's how many living units do we have versus people that want to live here and are trying to live here. And Housing Next put together an assessment that said between 2020 and 2025, we're projecting another increase of 5,194 new households, and we need to build at least that much or that much stock just to stay even with where we're at right now. And I'll talk about our vacancy rate and stuff like that in a minute. We're building faster than we have been. We're not building fast enough to even stay with household growth, much less dig out of the hole that we've been in over the last 15 or so years. So I'm encouraged by what Hope Church is trying to do on the housing, but I'm going to name this as a big trend out there. So what housing and homelessness means, I know Hope Church has a heart for this. We care, and we're working to grapple with it and understand it, like many of us are. Action House ourselves have seen a significant increase in the numbers of individuals experiencing homelessness over the last year. This is outdated. This is early December. Our team was actively working with 265 people who were experiencing homelessness, which was a 50% increase of people living on street or in cars than the year before. We'd anticipate another increase next year. Last year, and this is a very real thing, Karen and others know some of these people, right? These neighbors. We worked with 7 houseless neighbors who each died. Life is hard for many people, and life is even harder on the streets and in cars. We had a remembrance day and tried to honor, and there was somebody whose son had died outside that our team did not even know. This happens in every community, and yes, it happens in Holland, right? People are dying outside. There are people outside this weekend. And now, there are different institutions out there, and everybody is able to have their own beliefs, their own advantages and things. But sometimes I hear things like, you know what, it's just like mental health problems and people are refusing. And I'm like, yes, people have instabilities. People have mental health challenges and substance abuse challenges. They do in every community. And I think some studies that I read and I'm informed by, I find very convincing. And those studies will control for prevalence of mental health and substance abuse and even poverty in communities. And they will show time and time again that homelessness is a housing problem. It's exacerbated by mental health challenges and things, but they will find that whenever housing is scarce and rent is high, lots of people are homeless. And when rents are cheaper and housing is more abundant and there's a higher vacancy rate where people can find housing or be matched with it, homelessness is lower, regardless of any of those other situations. So it doesn't seem like rocket science, like it's math, but I want to share right here, this is just like median rent. You know, this will show cities and counties. And so this right here is the rate of homelessness per 100,000 people. Median rent, I showed you our median 1-bedroom is right about here. Right now we're overperforming. We're lower than where the national city standard would have us as a rate per 100,000 people. But in the long term, I don't think those things hold, right? And so lower median rent, lower rates of homelessness. The other chart, that only other thing it correlates to is vacancy rate, rental housing vacancy rate. When you are an 8% vacancy rate, homelessness is lower rate. When you're a 2% vacancy rate, homelessness is higher. The rental vacancy rate in Ottawa County is 1%. It's been that for a couple years. That's compared to a 5.5% Michigan average. You know, housing specialists will say you need 4 to 6%, sometimes 6 to 8% to be a healthy market, which means like my lease term ran out and I need to find another one because they're selling that house or somebody's coming in, or I need to be matched with another one where my lease date's going to start at roughly the same time. There has to be some open and available housing stock. We've been under 1% for a couple years now. And that is a huge challenge. Kent County, they're like blinking all like 5-alarm fire, red lights. You know, they're at like 3.5. Ottawa County population growth, right? Back to that. Wonderful thing to be in a thriving community, and it comes with very real challenges that we get to address together. Alice budget ramifications, I'm talking about housing and transportation are prioritized here. Food insecurity, we lead with food, because it's an early indicator of struggle. People start economizing on food, healthy food, and healthy, nutritious options are the first to be cut. Look at these obesity rates as measured in low-income Ottawa County from 2015 to 2020. That's a United Way assessment. Other things, household stress is measured to increase, again, not too surprising, with financial instability, with especially large ramifications for children. nervousness, measured anxiousness, and reported. And this is the impossible choices are faced, the thing that I was talking about, people trying to economize and make do as the income doesn't meet expenses, and they're trying to hold it together for their families. Who's Alice? 51% of senior households in the state of Michigan. I'd note that among the 20 most common occupations in Michigan, 70% pay less than $20 an hour. We have personal care aides that we work with very closely, teachers' assistants. Some truck drivers fall below the ALICE threshold, counter workers, retail, a lot of the workforce that we would know. And many of the care economy sectors are generally below that $20 an hour and would struggle under this framework. And 35% of families below the ALICE threshold have an emergency savings, so that means 65% have zero. So what happens when small car breakdown, tires go, all of those other things? So we work on emergency savings programs. So we try to structure our thinking and programming around some of this detail. So where is ALICE? I'm going to skip through that to be clear. It's all over the county. There's some communities where it's a higher percent of population than other. Holland Township, Zeeland City, Holland City are the three highest by proportion, as well as absolute numbers in Ottawa County. Now I get to jump into Community Action House, and then we can talk about needs. So that's the need landscape that Jane asked me to share, like what are we seeing and what are we wrestling with as an entity that provides human services here in the county. And now I'm going to jump into some of the stuff you guys have heard before with some updates. So I would share again that Community Action House is a locally founded and locally funded institution. That Hope Church was a part of that founding story. Some folks that are sitting here were a part of that founding story of people that came together working with others in our community to assess like where are needs, who is not being welcomed, who is not finding a willing expression of partnership on fit in our community, on a financial way forward, and how are we filling those gaps. So I'd say we're a creative response to community needs. Hope Church was one of our 4 initially supporting founding churches with those neighbors that were involved. It was this group called Churches United for Social Action, CUSA. Protestant Catholic churches coming together and soon bringing in some of the Jewish neighbors that were in our community to partner with us, all as this big tent approach to like, how do we just welcome and serve people together? And then locally funded, right now we're over 60 staff and then over 1,000 annual volunteers we just broke this last year, powering our integrated and impactful services. Nearly 90 churches support our work in different ways, over 100 annual corporate partners, and thousands of families find a way to step up and into our services. So when I say, as Jane was reading earlier, what our community chooses to do together is something I always say and that I take very seriously. This is a choice and this is a movement. It is not an institution that just says, just send money, we got it. It's a lot of together. It's a lot of doing things together as a creative expression of community compassion. So what do we do? When we say nourish, that's increasing healthy food access through things like our food club and opportunity hub. Our community kitchen over at Western Seminary, which is open right now for our neighbors providing hot meals. The Lakeshore Food Rescue, I'll talk about how that brings healthy food, not just to our services, but also other essential services. And an all-volunteer run community garden on the north side of Holland. We say equip. We partner with people to help address challenges and help them access other resources. Non-profit resources, also government resources that they might not know about that they qualify for. That's resource navigation assistance. That's our street outreach team that works at Refresh, at the library, on the street, working with those neighbors experiencing homelessness. And that's our partnership, Refresh, that we operate with First United Methodist Church as a drop-in shower and mail program for our homeless neighbors over at FUMC. And then empower. We partner with these guests to build on existing skills and try to provide pathways out of poverty and pathways to progress. And that means like financial capabilities, classes in individual counseling on credit building. We have a savings club initiative where we double match people's efforts to build up that emergency savings, trying to become some of those ALICE families that actually have $400 in their savings account so they can deal with fluctuations in their budget. We have a home ownership program. We can qualify people for down payment assistance. I'll talk more about each of those things. And now why we do this. I already shared that, so usually I'm like, yes, because a third of our neighbors struggle to meet the cost of essentials. You heard all that. But I would note that we do more than one thing. We often meet people with a need in food. It's one of those first things to be cut. But we try to provide services that are aligned to partner with neighbors on what's next, to find that next right step to stability, to progress, regardless of how they meet us, whether it's at Refresh, at the kitchen, or at Food Club. That is it, because we believe that a challenge in one area often signifies that there's going to be challenges elsewhere. So we try to provide holistic, integrated care approaches for our neighbors. So wraparound supports would be the industry speak for what we do. Detailed program updates. The Community Kitchen, for those who may not be aware, is a 30-plus year partnership that was founded in the early 90s. Folks like Sharon Aronshorst, who you guys know from here, was deeply involved in the founding when she was over at Western Seminary, and there were others that were involved, Tom Bogart and others, that wanted this as an expression of community hospitality, and this longstanding partnership between us and the seminary is a beautiful thing where they provide the space and the opportunity to welcome and serve in the core city, and we provide the staffing, the food, and the volunteer coordination efforts to make this feasible 7 days a week. I'll read one quote from a guest: "Togetherness. My favorite part is the connection. It is a place to be together and have meaningful conversations with friends." It is an expression of hospitality and welcome, and yes, it's a warm meal for many for whom that's the nicest meal of their day, and our very low-income neighbors. And our outreach team often works with people to provide case management for our neighbors experiencing homelessness. But some people who are not homeless also come. Low-income neighbors come and gather and eat, and it's an expression of community and welcome around a shared table. 2023 impact, I just updated this last week. We averaged just over 200 meals per day last year, and we're open just over 350 days. And that's 68,758 unique meals were provided at the kitchen through volunteers, prepping, cooking, serving, and cleaning up for our neighbors in need. And that was a 30% increase year on year. It correlates with increasing numbers of people on the street, those growth numbers that we'll see. I want to talk about the Food Club and Opportunity Hub. How many of you had the opportunity to be at our Food Club yet? Any? If you haven't, I'd love to give any of you a tour if you'd be curious. Paul helped me design some of that space, so shout out to Paul on getting that right. Thank you. Food Club was a reimagination of what our longstanding food pantry operations could be. What it is a high dignity, high choice, high participation method to get low-income families healthy food access in an inviting grocery store style environment. This is a place that prioritizes fresh produce, 6-day-a-week access, and a high-dignity shopping experience where kids can go with their parent and think like, you know what, the conveyor belts move, that must be a real grocery store, even though it's technically a food pantry. People are able to choose things that fit their cultural specifications and also things that their family wants, all while we're nudging healthy food access to shape how people eat. How does it work? Points are provided to families based on like their household size. So every month, if you qualify as a member, you're going to get a membership card that says you get 120 points. So you've got 4 people in your family. You've got 2, you're going to get 60 points, and so on and so forth. So you get points, and then you shop with points. So everything's labeled in points. You're going to be invited to pay a very small monthly fee, $11 to $17 a month, based on how much your family earns. So again, everyone that's coming to us, they all have some income on the Food Club side. It's just not enough. So we can take, if you're on the very low end, $11. If you're a family of 4 and you got 120 points, we're going to turn that into hundreds of dollars worth of healthy food access. So this thing where we're big wind at the back of people that are opting into this higher dignity approach where there's some dignity in paying something as you're able, and then we're matching that with a lot of community support and flexibility to add to what people can bring. And then the bottom right, you'll see healthy food costs fewer points. So once we have a points-based system, we're like the broccoli costs 1 point, the cake mix costs 4, right? That's kind of how it works when you're in Food Club. Impact on Food Club. This is actually, I didn't update this 2,000. This was last year. This was like, it was like 3,700 this year. My bad, because the unique neighbor count in that 3,700 was 11,000 unique family members ate food off our shelves last year. And that would be 2023. And that's a 43% increase from the year before. Fresh fruit and veggies remain just over 3 times as popular as our second category. And right now, it's over 1,400 families coming to take food off our shelves every single week. And these are low-income qualified families, all below our service threshold. John, as one story, we have a number of neighbor stories like this, just sharing like, I've never eaten as many fruits and vegetables as this, and this is a man that used to come to our food pantry. And after 5-6 months of membership, he shared with us, like, he saw a volunteer he long knew, and she noticed that he was walking and didn't need to be in his chair. And he shared, like, I've lost 50 pounds, right? It was in 5 to 6 months of membership, and he had never felt as good. Now, he wasn't the picture of health, right? He had had a long and hard life. He was walking again, he had lost a lot of weight, and he was able to do this because he had chosen a lot of healthier food off our shelves. So how different that operation is to our traditional pantry. Food rescue. Where does a lot of our food come from? First, we buy food every week. We guarantee we're going to have fresh food availability, so we have to do that. We get drives that donate shelf-stable food to our shelves. But the biggest part and the most efficient part of our food supply is what we call food rescue. You might see trucks labeled Lakeshore Food Rescue on their sides. That's Community Action House that goes to supermarkets, you know? So new Harvest Health store opens, we show up on day one, we're like, hey, how can we make food waste not a thing here? If you're ever long on bananas, we'll pick them up and we'll get them to people in need. And you get a tax write-off, and we're gonna make it easy for every business to not have food waste. That's our goal. So we've got volunteers and staff drivers that head out on the roads every day, and they pick up food. And then they bring it not just to our own pantry, and we're the biggest one as Food Club, we take a lot of the food, but it also goes to like St. Vincent de Paul. It goes to Escape Ministries. It goes to Boys and Girls Club, a little fresh fridge. We start to place fresh fridges so they can have healthy food snacks. When we're long on blueberries and it's blueberry season, and the lovely farmers give us 30,000 pounds of blueberries in 20 days, most of it goes to our members, and a lot of it goes to other food pantries. So our food rescue trucks move stuff around to some of these other food pantries and food access sites so that low-income folks can access healthy food that exists in our community, because good food belongs with people and not landfills. The other thing I'll mention, we've got over 100 people that have downloaded this app right here. It's called Food Rescue Hero. We were the 14th community across the states to bring this in. So when we have small food pickups, people can be driven and say, oh, Holland Hospital has food to donate. And I've done this, and I get pinged on my phone, I click to accept, and then it tells me where to drive to Holland Hospital and where to go in the back door, and I show up, and they give me a cart of food, and I put it in the back of my minivan, and it says, drive to St. Vincent de Paul, or drive to Community Action House. And so it's like Uber, but for volunteering. And so if any of you want to download that app, I can share it out later. It's cool, and we're going to keep growing that, because that means we're not driving a big expensive truck, but when it's a small local delivery, you can do it in your car. It's a cool thing if people got kids or a little extra time some days, because you can say no, and you can say yes. Impact of food rescue. Last year, we broke 2 million pounds of food collected that would have otherwise been landfill. That's 2,062,000 pounds. That was a 67% increase on the year before. That's nearly 3,000 tons of carbon emissions negated that would have been wasted or lost if that just went landfill. And the equivalent of 147 million gallons of water that would have been wasted through the life cycle of that food if that food went to waste. So there's significant environmental ramifications of trying to reduce the amount of food in America that's wholesome but goes to landfills. So we solve there, and it is wholesome food that I would eat. We just have to get it to people quick, because it might only have 4 to 5 days left on it, and that's what we're trying to be good at. Equipped through street outreach. This is our team of 7 individuals or caseworkers that work with our neighbors on the street to provide whatever it takes care and partnership. They operate Refresh, Hygiene, and Hope. Last year, something new is we added a recovery coach with community mental health, somebody that works with people on addiction support and recovery, and we operate multiple groups a week, and we transport people to inpatient services outside of our county lines. We've gone multiple counties away to try to find beds that will work for people. And so we transport people to appointments, we work with them in small group recovery systems, and we also have extension hours in partnership with Herrick District Library, where you might see our staff there for 20 hours a week, working with neighbors who are often there to stay warm and trying to partner with them on a journey to housing. Impact there, last year, we had 62 clients that we worked with that we were able to achieve permanent housing success, help move them into permanent houses. That was a decrease from the 86 the year before. Housing vacancy is becoming more and more of a challenge. I don't like sharing decreases, but I'll always transparently share. We want that number to be going up. Housing success, it went down. But for those 62, it is still a very big deal to move from the street, some of them on the street for years, and able to achieve permanent housing. Lots of others, we partner with shelter, and we can get them inside and in shelter when it works for them. It does not always work, right? Showers at Refresh, referrals to other resources. We help make sure people not just have IDs, but also they have like Medicaid. Many are eligible and maybe not insured right now. We help them qualify for those benefits that are their due and that can help them stabilize. So Medicaid qualification first, maybe a recovery bed second, those sort of things. Here's a story of somebody last summer who we helped house. Michael had been unhoused for more than 5 years. And this is last winter, January, February is when he was housed. He was able to find an apartment with our team, and he shared that like after 5 years out, he was sitting at his window, and he was just like, this is the first time he found that the snow was actually beautiful, right? Like he was sitting at his window and had a place to call his own. And the last thing I'll cover is like empower through financial wellness. So this is like economic mobility or empowerment rooted in relationships of trust. And so we provide courses and one-on-one counseling to people on things like home ownership education, on building emergency savings. We also provide group volunteer income tax assistance, which kicks off next week, where we have volunteers come in and provide tax return assistance to make sure people are applying for all of the different returns, home heating tax credits and things that are often the due of the low-income population, but they might not be aware of or taking advantage of. So we want to maximize that and then start talking about what's next with people. Here's a quote from somebody: "I am grateful for the budgeting goal program. It restored hope and helped me prioritize my daily life and work through obstacles I may face. And now it feels so much easier." And what we hear time and time again is it's not really the technical acumen, it's the shoulder-to-shoulder work of like, now I have Tabitha, now I have Rachel, now I have Bill. It's that accountability partner and that somebody that's in it with you when life is really hard and they get it. Through our courses and counseling in 2023, I don't have our updated number on homes purchased by graduates. It was 15 homes purchased by graduates in 2022. In our VITA program, 340 filers brought in $553,000 in tax returns. State and federal, that was a 53% increase as that grows. We're the only bilingual VITA site in Ottawa or Allegan, so we provide Spanish language VITA services. And we also work with families that have a home, particularly older, but are falling behind on their payments because of those struggles. And we can help people renegotiate with our housing counselors some of that. And so we worked with 47 families. It was about, I think, 61 or 62 the year before to help renegotiate mortgages, to help them stay housed in their home and to hold on to that really valuable family asset. Here's a story. Sometimes these are a couple years going. In 2021, Ron joined one of our homeownership education classes, and he realized, like, gosh, this is not for me right now. And so after that, he needed to work on other things. So he joined a credit and savings program, working with our team and one-on-one counseling, coming every month. First thing he did was worked on increasing his credit score from mid-500s to the mid-600s, and he had to get rid of his debt, paid off his debt as he did that. And after 2 years, he finally bought a home last June. And so like these are long-run stories that people keep coming. You wonder what's happening in the Opportunity Hub while Food Club happens. We got people meeting one-on-one in some of these rooms, working on these long-term stories of how might I move forward, what are these goals. What's next for us? Last March, April, we went through another strategic rethink, like what are we going to emphasize in the coming period? We've got 8 strategic pillars. I'm not going to go through them. You're probably not interested, but I can chat with any of you if you want to know what's next in more detail. But what's next in 2024, you'll see these things, so I'll share with you now. Last year, we received a grant for a transportation expression of the Food Club, high dignity, high fresh, high choice experience to food access. And this is basically a custom RV whose wall folds up, and it becomes basically a farmer's market. It's going to be the Food Club Fresh Express. It's going to go to some of the communities where you have a high concentration of Food Club members, and they're going to be able to take the fresh fruits and vegetables like they do off our shelves, but in their own community on certain days. That should be done and launched late summer of this year, which will be a nice new thing for our team to offer to neighbors. We're also hiring a healthcare partnerships manager to step more deeply into the nutrition referrals that are often happen to us with less effectively than we would like. And we would really like to tighten the relationship when people are screening for food insecure households who also are screened for a medically relevant or a nutritionally relevant medical condition like diabetes, hypertension, these things, that they would immediately be referred with information to our programming, because we also have Healthy at Home, nutrition training programs, and we've been able to march with a number of people through 40 to 50 pounds of weight loss, to reversing some of these diagnoses just through like diet management. And if they're low income and struggling to manage some of those conditions, we think we can be partners in the healthcare space and achieving some shared wins. What's next in 2024? In partnership with Dwelling Place and Hope Church, an affordable housing project. And so this is our former pantry over here. This is a city lot next to it, and another city lot right here that we negotiated with the city to partner with this, and we brought Dwelling Place in as builder and manager of this property. And this is the Hope Church parcel that was going to partner with First United Methodist Church, right? Now, we had a third parcel that was up on 16th and River, but Hope Church is doing something really special with their property. And so we decided with Dwelling Place last summer, last August, when the First United Methodist Church and Hope Church project did not have funding and did not have a course to achieve funding, is we swapped out one other vacant parcel we had and swapped in the Hope Church parcel. So that's one of the 3 buildings that will be happening in this upcoming affordable housing project. And then we're looking to expand our resale store presence. So we're looking for resale store number 2 on the north side of Holland. We're in a property search mode right now. Why? Because that's a lot of earned income that supports our program, and it's also missional. Way back when, we used to have a clothing closet. When people would come to our pantry and they'd say, like, my kid needs a winter coat, and we'd say, it's pink and it's a size large. That's all we have. Now we get to voucher people in to our resale store. They shop like a normal human, right? They can go with their kid and choose a coat that's right for them. So our resource navigation team can write vouchers. Oh, you get a discount or you get free, depending on their need. They have vouchers and they go to our resale stores and they're able to shop for the items that they need. But again, not feel like here's the free. They have that experience of being in the store, very much like Food Club, and choosing the thing that's right for their family and their need. Get involved, volunteer, give, champion. You guys, so many of you do that stuff, so I'm not going to talk about that. I am going to do questions. All right.
Scott, where do you get all your energy?
Coffee. No, no, thank you, Paul. Like, honestly, it is a privilege to do this. Having the opportunity to blend both passion and profession is an absolute privilege, and I don't think lightly on that, and I try to do the best I can to understand things. I like to try to understand them, and I like to try to find a better way, so this is a good fit for me, I think. Mm-hmm.
Scott, does Community Action House still have an option on the property on River and 16th?
We do.
Future use?
That option expires at the end of February, so I'm negotiating with Housing Next to see if there's any possibility to exercise that option and hold it for another round. It would have to be combined with another parcel. It's not big enough on its own. It's 29 units. We need one more to be able to pull in the state and federal funding for that part of things to make it matter. But I'm hopeful we could hold it for a couple years. I give that a lower probability of success, to be honest, but I have not stopped doing at least my small part of working on it. So if you know anyone with $470,000, let me know.
I was reminded that we are live and also being recorded for those of us who are going to be commenting in public here. David.
Thank you. This is just great, as always. So we've heard from Housing Next, and now we've heard from you this morning about the need for affordable housing, and we're doing some things through the new projects you've just described, Jubilee, Habitat. Mm-hmm. We do these things one by one. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we're proud of the fact that we're an economically growing community. We give tax breaks to industries to add jobs and add plants and economic productivity, and we celebrate that. But of course, what that does is just completely overwhelm all the housing initiatives one by one, bit by bit, that we're doing.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, is there anybody thinking about the larger structural economics of economic growth bringing in more and more jobs, which means we have low unemployment, so you don't have any trouble finding people jobs, I imagine, and how you balance that with affordable housing? Also, if we I mean, I also think the larger question is, what's the ideal size for a flourishing community? Because as we bring in more and more industry and incentivize that with tax breaks, and then build more and more housing to house the workers for those people, then we have a larger and larger community, and a small town becomes a bigger town, becomes a city, and ultimately, it seems to me, the logic is that big cities are better than small towns. So, but I don't know if there's a question in there, but my question is somebody thinking about the macroeconomics of what's driving both job opportunities and balancing that with affordable housing?
Yes. Well, David, I think that's a very thoughtful question, and it sounds like at least you're thinking about that. And I'm challenged, and I have heard you share that, and I wrestle with that as well, right? Do I know the answer? No, I do not know the answer to that. One thing I would share on some of these projects, there I think is growing understanding, and with the LG Energy Solution property, there is a separate bucket of money that the MEDC, or the Economic Development Corporation of Michigan, earmarked just for affordable housing in this area. And that is the one likelihood that we're able to get a pot of additional funding for our affordable housing project, because we can lean on that, because that's designed to serve just the Holland-Zeeland community. Because we were supposed to, like you guys, get an allocation from Ottawa County Housing Commission's revolving loan fund. And that fund's intent has kind of changed over the last 14 months, let's just say. But there is more scope of control in kind of the Holland Control Economic Development bucket, and that's a piece of negotiation right now on a number of housing things. That does not solve your riddle, but I think when there's incentives for bring jobs, let's pay per job, I think that at least establishes a framework of like, and how do you build something that actually targets, at scale building of affordable housing. And I would always encourage like, what is the per unit subsidy that it takes to build is something we should think about. Not just, am I building housing? Like, what is our cost per unit of impact or per unit of building? And I'm not sure if we're all there yet, because there's many different methods of building housing. Some are more expensive than others. And I think we have to build a lot. That doesn't really answer the question. It's a very thoughtful question. Okay, so thank you.
When I was at Maplewood, our deacons worked with Community Action House on a program called, Community Housing Partnership, where the church bought property and put it into a ministry, I would call it. And then we had a family live in that. It was actually right across the street from Maplewood. Are they still doing the Community Housing Partnership?
The Community Housing Partnership was a partnership between us and Good Samaritan and a number of churches. And I believe in 2014 or 2015, it might have been, it was before my time that separated, right? And so that shut down. Community Action House was financially struggling. We sold the properties that we owned, the rental properties that we owned as a part of that. And that was tied a bit to us being in the financial red, to be honest, if I want to get behind the scenes a little bit. And again, I wasn't here. I'm not blaming others. I'm just saying I came in. I was like, oh, 6 years in the red. Okay. We sold our assets. Let's not sell anymore. So there was a little bit of that, but it was also a long-run partnership with Good Sam where we tried to separate, where we did more asset building and home ownership, and they stepped more fully into that rental management space where they're steering a lot of the government resources on the rental side of things. And so we did a little bit of mission clarity and separation. One thing I struggle with on that model, because I have contemplated, like, how can we do it? Like, our outreach team would love us to control homes so we can guarantee pathways in for people. And we could try to campaign and buy up a bunch of homes and say these are guaranteed. But with an under 1% vacancy rate, somebody loses. Like, supply matters. So like, if Action House buys, there's a family that would have otherwise rented that in the workforce that like, we're kind of shifting who gets a home right now, and somebody's losing that really bad game of musical chairs. Like, so I think like supply, and to David's point, maybe there's a part of demand management that's a part of this, because supply and demand are both a thing, right? Demand's going up and up and up, and supply hasn't been following as rapidly. And so I'm like, build, we need units. And maybe we'll control some of those, we'll see, that's.
Scott, one of the most impressive things about what you've done in the last few years is that transition to human dignity in the provision of services. I think that's huge. And I know you have a goal of sharing that model with other organizations in other parts of the state. And I wonder if you could tell us how that's gone, if you've had lots of visitors, if you've seen your approach, your humane approach, move to other parts of the state.
Yeah, and I think what Bob's speaking of is we really, I like to say, like, we rewrote our values, but we're trying to say, like, there's nothing new for us under the sun. We were founded to be a place of welcome and expression of community compassion. What we really try to do is double down on that and think, like, are we really living into that, right? Were we living into that when there was the 25-person waiting room and people were locked outside in the rain during lunch when I started? And I was like, that doesn't seem to be in alignment. Let's unlock the doors and let them inside. Because the answers I often got was like, well, they haven't complained. I'm like, that's a power imbalance, right? That's a power imbalance. Like, they haven't complained because they're desperate. And so how do we create services that might not be explicitly demanded, because people in desperation don't demand often or too often, but like, how do we think about, like, what experience would I want, or would you want, or would any human with equal worth and dignity demand, just on that basis? And so this, like, radical welcome that we try to promote is, like, we believe standing on founding values, but also trying to reimagine what that looks like and say, are we measuring up to it? And never fully, but it matters. So the food club space is one of those, like, how do we imagine a pantry that's higher dignity? And I think it's been going well. And so it's not like our mission to launch food clubs elsewhere. However, we care and we share by basically open sourcing everything we do. And so it's almost monthly that I'm either on calls, or I or Cara or others on our team are hosting tours of people really interested, like, how did you do this? How does it really go? I've been in calls with people from different parts of the country. Most are in Michigan of our in-person visits. I was just on a call with somebody in England and somebody in Israel last week that are looking to possibly reorient their own services on this basis. And again, not our mission, not funded to do, but I care as people are saying, like, gosh, that looks like a better way. We care to share a better way as we see it and as we found it. So right now there's still like 3 of us. There's going to be another one in Saginaw that has funding to launch a food club. Muskegon's likely going to launch a food club. There's a big question mark around Benton Harbor right now. So there's a few things happening locally, and then there's some, like, lighter mimicry happening elsewhere that we do share with.
Wow, that's great. Scott, I have 2 questions related to disability.
Yes.
So number of people with disabilities, percentages is about 20% generally.
Yes.
Have you broken down the number of people you serve by disability? And is the incidence of those you serve higher than 20%, those living with disabilities? You mentioned mental health challenges as one.
Yep.
Just wondering if there are other statistics you have to share.
Yes.
And then the other question is related to the accessibility of the housing that you're helping to build.
Yes, absolutely. Great questions. And so a couple ways that I would answer that is, I don't know the exact numbers right now. There was supposed to be my vice president of programs here doing part of this presentation with me, but she lives on the other side of the county, so she got a free pass this morning to not come. I wanted you guys to know people beyond me, and she would probably know more of the, like, what are our stats today. I can say on that, we could run those numbers and I could try to get them back to you, but anecdotally, we usually my best guess is we're going to be somewhere north of 20% if 20% is the average, right? Like, people living with disabilities and challenges, that's often going to cross-correlate with financial struggle because of a lot of the system that we live in. And it's harder to up that income, and your expenses are going to be higher. So both those sides of that equation I was talking about can often be a challenge. When we designed Food Club and Opportunity Hub, disability advocates actually, like, went through our facility before all of our decision, like everything from, like, door handle placements, hallway width, all of that is beyond code because of them co-designing that with us, because we know we serve a lot of people with different challenges. And so we tried to do as best we can in that space. I know the Hope Church building is going to be to one standard. Our other buildings, I would have to bring in dwelling place and the architect on that. Like, it is, I don't think it's going to be the same standard as where Hope Church building is, but it's going to be above the coding floor. to be as disability friendly as possible, and I don't know all the different decisions that are made in that, so I'm sorry. But yes, it is something that matters to us, and then it's that balance of like which units and which of the 3 parcels would be accessible in which ways. Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. I hate to cut off the question and answer time, but it's time. Thank you very, very much for updating us again. Yes, I can remember when I was volunteering at the food pantry that I learned things from the guests that came through. I remember times I went home to Larry and I said, you know, I've never made this vegetable before, but someone at the food pantry told me, oh, this is what you do with it. You do this, and I was like, oh, I've never done that before. And it was great. And the individuals who stopped and read every single label and remarked about how much sugar was in each item, I was like, I need to pay more attention to what I'm eating. And it was a mutuality and a partnership, truly, and I appreciate that. Thank you for today. I want to just also, as Scott already mentioned, say that next week the Lighthouse Immigrant Advocates will be here again on page 13 in the worship bulletin today. You can read a little bit more about that. Hopefully there'll be a little less snow and ice next week, and maybe even a little bit warmer. But please join us next week. I want to close with prayer today, so please join me in prayer. Creating and nourishing God, we give thanks for those who had a vision to create Community Action House, some of whom we know are Hope Church members, and we give thanks for them. And we ask God for your gracious love for the Community Action House staff, including Scott. And we ask God for your care and protection for all whom Community Action House serves. We think of those especially today and in this coming week of snow and cold and frigid temperatures. We do pray for their care, for their protection. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you all. If you have any follow-up questions or